Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. Welcome to Trump Watch. Let's start with Iran, a natural place to start. This is where the evil and deep immorality of the U.S. regime under which we live is being manifested publicly, openly, without any hesitation. They've now announced, U.S. officials have announced that D-Day is coming, D-Day like World War II, but in an economic sense. Apparently, they've set aside their bombing campaign where they bomb power plants and bridges and other things that target the civilian population, but with the rationalization that the military could be using these things like bridges and power plants and so forth. And now they're going to focus totally on economic warfare, as they call it. And it's really just a strengthening of the sanction system that they've been waging against Iran for decades. And the evil of this is, and the immorality of it, is that it targets directly the civilian population, the Iranian people. It's no different from state-sponsored terrorism or private terrorism. Terrorism targets the innocent population of a country, like a bomb in a cafe or a restaurant, with the intent of altering the policies of the regime, because the regime is supposed to say, well, okay, we don't want any more innocent civilians killed, and so we'll accommodate you by changing our policies. That's what sanctions do, and as I've long argued, they are as evil as any act of terrorism. And now it's manifesting itself because what they're saying is they're imposing what they call secondary sanctions, that they're going to impose penalties, punishments, like some type of economic punishment, tariffs or what have you, denying people the ability to use the U.S. monetary system, banks and so forth. They've got all kinds of avenues to use with these secondary sanctions, but the idea is to stop other countries from doing business with Iran. The idea is that if you do business with Iran, we will punish you with some type of economic sanction. And so the idea is it's a siege strategy. It's how can we kill more Iranians in order to finally get this regime to capitulate, become like the Venezuelan regime, become a member of the U.S. empire and follow our orders, or a total collapse of the regime, which then turns the entire country into civil war, no government, different gangs vying for power, total chaos and crisis, where more people, of course, will be killed. It's a brutal, brutal system. It's been going on for decades, like I say. The standard of living of the Iranian people used to be fairly high until the U.S. put the sanctions on and several decades ago, and then over time, their standard of living just plummeted. I remember reading that some families were having to sell heirlooms and so forth as the economy was constricting. And there's right-wingers that are cheering about this, like in the mainstream press. This is great. This is working. This is gonna finally bring victory, unconditional surrender. It's just a brutal, evil strategy of targeting innocent people with the aim of getting a regime change or a change in policy of the Iranian regime. It's just horrendous. And this is where I keep saying that this is the time for Americans to do reflecting, especially Americans that go to church every Sunday. How does one reconcile this type of action with principles of Christianity or any religion for that matter? It's impossible. Now, of course, the rationale that they keep saying is, there's nuclear weapons. We're trying to stop nuclear weapons. This is pure nonsense. Any nuclear material has been buried in rubble. And remember, they had that bombing campaign several months ago where they said they destroyed all the nuclear material. They bring up this WMD thing because that way everybody gets all uptight and says, no, now we can justify the sanctions and the killing all these innocent people to protect us from a nuclear attack, a WMD attack. We saw this movie with the Iraq War. And remember, Saddam Hussein, WMDs, mushroom clouds, Colin Powell's big chart showing WMDs, and it was just all a lie. But they bring this up because it serves as a rationale. Let me tell you something. If there was an imminent danger of a nuclear attack, which is ridiculous, I mean, like Iran's really gonna, where are they gonna get the ballistic missiles? Are they gonna use bottle rockets to send a nuclear bomb to the United States, knowing that the United States has, I don't know how many thousands of nuclear bombs that they could just carpet nuclear bomb Iran? It's just so ridiculous. But let me tell you something. If that type of thing was a danger when Trump initially went in there and started bombing Iran, there's no possibility whatsoever that he would have done that without going on national television and saying, my fellow Americans, we are under grave attack by Iran, the threat of an attack, WMDs, mushroom clouds. He would have brought out Colin Powell's charts and changed Iraq to Iran and said, I have no choice but to defend America with a preemptive strike here. He didn't do that. And I'll tell you why he didn't do it. Because he had reached success with that military raid in Venezuela that killed close to 100 innocent people as part of their much vaunted war on drugs, one of the most evil, immoral, deadly, and destructive programs in U.S. history. And because he got success in kidnapping the head of state of another country and bringing him back to stand trial for violating, get this, U.S. drug laws while this guy's serving as head of state in Venezuela, he says, I've succeeded. And this is the problem with foreign interventionism, is that when they achieve what they consider as a success, like they did with Venezuela, they say, oh, this is fun. We can do this again. And so they said, Iran, it's been hollowed out by economic sanctions for decades here. It has no real means of defense. We can go in there and wrap this thing up in 6 weeks. And because, look, the Venezuela thing, which, remember, had come out of nowhere, that I had said before Venezuela, the crisis there was even on the radar screen, I'd said, be prepared. I wrote this. Be prepared for a foreign policy crisis or war because of the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. I mean, there was a rebellion afoot within the MAGA community with respect to Jeffrey Epstein. And so what do? Well, I said, I know what they're going to do. They're going to create a crisis to distract attention away. And sure enough, within, I don't know, a month or so, all of a sudden this whole armada of ships starts heading to Venezuela. And all of a sudden I got a crisis in the news media, the crisis in Venezuela. It works perfectly. I mean, you take Epstein off the front pages, and now we've got the Venezuela crisis day 1 and day 2 and all this nonsense. But when they go in there and they achieve this success where they don't get regime change, they didn't want regime change. They just wanted a loyal member of the U.S. empire. And as I've pointed out in previous episodes of Trump Watch, they're now partnering with the communist, socialist, narco-terrorist regime that they decried for decades when they were trying to get a new regime in. That guy, I think his name was Juan Guaido, or he was the new president they declared and so forth. I mean, they railed against not just Maduro or Hugo Chavez, who they hated. I mean, they hated viscerally. It was the regime. It was a narco-terrorist regime, they said. And of course, it stands to reason, because Chavez and Maduro are only going to have avowed Marxists working for them. They're not going to have free market libertarians working in a socialist regime. But it's this socialist regime that they're now partnering with, where they're essentially running. But with that, quote, success, that's what they were hoping to replicate, and still hoping to replicate in Iran. No matter how many people they have to kill. Doesn't matter how many they have to kill. Remember Madeleine Albright's famous, or I should say infamous, statement to 60 Minutes when they said to her with respect to the sanctions against Iraq. 60 Minutes says, 500,000 Iraqi children children have died because of these sanctions. Now, I'm not so sure it was really that number, but she didn't question the number. She just said, is this worth it? And she says, oh, well, yeah, it's worth it. Oh, I mean, if that doesn't show the evil of this regime, I don't know what it is. What would be worth killing 500,000 children? What have children done? You know, because they're the children of Iraqi citizens. I mean, it is absolutely credible, and yet hardly anyone objected over here in the United States because it's them. It's them. I remember there was a heroic guy. I wrote about this guy, Bert Sachs. I mean, he was heroic. He's from Seattle. He said, "To heck with you and your stupid sanctions." And so he took medicines and food and other essentials to Iraq. He went over there personally and helped out the Iraqi people. And man, the U.S. Treasury Department, now they didn't criminally indict him, which was surprising. They could have, but they didn't. But they went after him with a $10,000 fine. They imposed this fine. And God, this guy's heroic. I'm not going to pay you a dime. I'm not going to pay your fine. And he resisted them for more than a decade. I mean, it was fantastic. And at the end of it, I think they just sort of threw in the towel and said, "Oh well, forget it." But he outlasted him. He never paid a dime. But that's what we need in this country is a revival of that type of conscience of standing for the right thing, and this notion that we should be targeting innocent people for the sake of regime change or some other political goal, or to turn a regime into a member of the U.S. empire like they've done in Venezuela. It's just horrendous. But in any event, Trump never went on television and said, "Oh, well, they're coming to get us with WMDs." Don't you know that he would have done that if there was a real nuclear threat? This isn't an afterthought, in my opinion. He's just bringing it up, and it doesn't appear that he's going to accomplish anything anyway with respect to that. So that they're really now hoping to squeeze the Iranian people to such an extent where they start dying, and then the Iranian regime says, "Oh, we can't stand this anymore. You're killing too many of our people." But that's not likely to happen. What about the U.S.? If the U.S., the American people are suffering the consequences of this war too. I mean, that's what that Iranian blockade of the Strait of Hormuz is designed to do, to create chaos, economic chaos in the world, including among the American people. And we see that it's at least partially working. I mean, there's other factors like Trump's tariffs and Federal Reserve and IRS and income taxation. I mean, there's other factors creating economic distress. But do you think you'd ever see the day when the U.S. government would capitulate because there's a large number of Americans that are suffering extreme impoverishment or even death? It never happened. And so the other factor of this is, you see, they say that they think that by constricting the Iranian economy, making people poorer, that limits the tax revenues that are sent to the Iranian government, or that the Iranian government is collecting from the Iranian people. So you constrain the economy, less taxes go into the regime. So that's a factor in this also. You can see that happening here in the United States. That's what the deficit's all about. They're spending more here in the United States than they bring in taxes. But they're scared to death to raise the taxes because midterms are around the corner. And the Iranian regime knows that midterms are around the corner, and they know that the American people don't like this war. And so that's where the Trump people are getting a little nervous and a little desperate because they can't get out of this tar baby. And they're hoping that this D-Day, this economic constriction, this economic warfare that targets the Iranian people will bring victory, unconditional surrender. Remember that term, unconditional surrender? That was one of the goals, or a destruction or a turning over of their nuclear material. or regime change. I mean, we heard all those. And what they just did not anticipate, which is odd. You would think that they would be smart enough to anticipate the closure there of the Strait of Hormuz. But when people are desperate, I mean, Iran knew that they couldn't defeat the United States militarily. It's impossible. This is a hollowed out regime from decades. But they're going to resort to whatever desperate measures they can resort to, unless they become like Venezuela and just, a loyal little puppet of the U.S. government. But they chose not to do that. And so we see this targeting of people. And you see U.S. officials citing Cuba and Venezuela as an example of this D-Day economic warfare. Well, they were willing to kill Venezuelan people. I mean, they had a total blockade there on oil on which they depended. And it's a socialist regime, so you know that right there's mass poverty. But they had the resources of oil, and once the U.S. put that blockade on, they were faced with death by starvation in mass. So one can understand why they would capitulate. And the same with Cuba right now. They're willing to kill as many Cubans as they want to. So this notion of, we love the Iranian people, we're trying to save them. If only they'll rise up, we'll be at their protectors, and we're same with the Cuban people. We love the Cuban people. This is just pure nonsense. This is a brutal regime under which we're living, and this is what a lot of Americans don't want to face. We live under a tyrannical, brutal, ruthless regime. And it's all because of these systems that I've been talking about in Trump Watch and the rest of my work. Evil, immoral, destructive systems. Drug war. They just killed a couple more people in boats based on their notion of, they're violating U.S. drug laws thousands of miles away. We can kill them whenever we want. And they can. I mean, this is the kind of regime we live under. This is what Americans don't want to face. No, Jacob, we live under a free country. Thank God I'm an American, because at least I know I'm free. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your service. You're protecting my freedom. This is all delusional. Americans are not free. You can't be free when you live under a regime that's destroying your own liberty, by the way, with these sanctions. I mean, they're destroying our liberty to travel and trade with whomever we want. Go ahead and try traveling to Cuba and spending money there without permission of your U.S. masters. I guarantee you they will put you in jail immediately on your return. Americans returning from a foreign country have to turn over their cell phones to get searched. You have to give them your password. I mean, a free country? Give me a break. And these assassinations there. The due process clause of the Bill of Rights is very clear. No one shall be killed without due process of law. Very clear. Our ancestors may put that in there for a reason. They're killing whoever they want. It's not that you won't kill Americans without due process of law. No one will be killed without due process of law. That's exactly what they're doing on the high seas, thousands of miles under this idiotic, ridiculous, power-lusting program known as the War on Drugs. This is an evil, evil program, and they're using secret evidence. I mean, if a communist regime was using secret evidence that's never disclosed to kill people, assassinate people, Americans would be saying, communism, But when it's their own regime, it's a good government, Jacob. It gives us our Social Security, our Medicare, it takes care of us. All this welfare statism is a narcotic. It's a narcotic that gets people passive, compliant, obedient, deferential. That's what the whole welfare state's all about. Franklin Roosevelt knew that if he could get people hooked on Social Security, he'd have them. He'd have the seniors. The seniors would become passive. It's like walk into an opium den where everybody's smoking opium. They're all addicted to opium. They're all going to say, peace, brother, peace, brother. You think they're going to be rebelling? Of course not. It's a narcotic. And so when you see these assassinations and you see these sanctions killing people, Jacob, let me take another, inhaling of my opium. Oh, it's so wonderful to be here and life's so great. That's what the welfare state is about. It's not, oh no, Jacob, they love us. They care for us. They're good, compassionate, caring. Really, the IRS? The IRS that everybody's scared of? Everybody's terrified of the IRS. You get a letter from the IRS and I'm not saying it's not justified because they can destroy you. We all know that. But there's no goodness or caring or compassion with these welfare state programs. You see, that's the fallacy of the left. The left says, oh, Jacob, it's a good government. It's taking care of us. There's no good, caring, compassionate when it comes to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, or any other welfare state program. Nothing. And notice what it's doing now. I mean, we've been saying this practically since the start of FFF, where you cannot continue this trajectory you're on, where you've got out of control spending, including on these so-called entitlements and the bombing campaigns and the sanction campaigns and the war on drugs and the war on immigrants and so forth. It's going to catch up. As I stated in a blog post this week, we're headed toward the cliff, and you can't ever predict when the cliff is going to occur. This is what Richard Ebley and I have been saying in Libertarian Angle for a long time now. You don't know how close that cliff is. I mean, yeah, there's been libertarian economists claiming for a long time that the crash is coming, the crash is coming. Nobody can predict when, but it's not a question of whether or if. It's a question of when. That cliff is coming. We don't know when, but it's coming. You've got $40 trillion in debt. These programs cost money. Those bombs cost money. The sanctions cost money. Enforcing sanctions. The war on immigrants. The war on, or I should say illegal immigrants, although to a certain extent they're attacking legal immigrants too. These cost a lot of money. The immigration police state. I mean, the kidnappings, the ICE people, the Border Patrol. I mean, these things are not cheap. We're talking about billions of dollars. And so you got now $40 trillion debt. And there's something amiss here because you've got this bond market crisis where the U.S. has been intervening. The Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, has been intervening by buying long-term bonds, which is a very unusual strategy. And because the interest rates on these long-term bonds are soaring. I mean, I read one financial expert in the Main Street Press saying that the interest rate, which is a price of those long-term bonds, he said that's the most important price of all the prices. Now, I'm not enough of a financial expert to understand that, but I'm enough of an expert on libertarianism to know when I see people getting nervous over a situation, and when they're intervening in the bond market, that means something's amiss here, which means that cliff that we've been talking about for a long time now may be getting closer. Just impossible to know. But one of the funny things, there are always some humorous things in all this, was that they asked President Trump about Bessent's intervention in the bond market. And Trump says, well, yeah, he did intervene. And they said, well, do you think he'll intervene again? Because Bessent's threatening to go out and do it again, which had no effect on the bond market, that threat. And Trump says, we have all kinds of means of intervention, including military means. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean they're going to go bomb the bond market? What exactly? What do you mean you're going to intervene militarily in the bond market? How's that work? I mean, you see, but the answer always is bomb, 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 bomb. I mean, that's the thing they're calling for in Cuba. That's what they were calling for in Venezuela. It's what they did in Iraq, Afghanistan. I mean, it's just bomb, bomb, bomb. Kill, kill, kill. Martin Luther King had it right when he said, this is the most violent regime in the world today, he said. Well, it still is. That was back in the 60s, but it's a violent regime. This is what Americans won't recognize. That we live under a very violent, evil immoral set of systems that have been grafted onto our federal governmental system. And because if you start out with a limited government republic, where government's limited to what it's supposed to do, you've got yourself a free society. I mean, now, perfection is never going to be achieved. It's impossible to achieve perfection. We're human beings. But if you look at, for example, the Gilded Age, they came pretty darn close. No income tax, no IRS, no DEA, drug war, war on... Well, they had started immigration controls up to that. First immigration law was passed in the 1870s, followed by the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882, which is horribly evil, immoral law. But by and large, I mean, the so-called Ellis Island system, even though it discriminated brutally against Chinese immigrants, they were letting in about 98% of immigrants from Europe. No Federal Reserve at that time, no paper money. They used gold and silver coins. They didn't trust government, and rightly so. That was why the Constitution called for gold and silver coins. How did that get eliminated without a constitutional amendment? Because they just did it. They used the emergency of the Great Depression. Roosevelt did that. That was another legacy of Franklin Roosevelt. And it's up to the Supreme Court to enforce the Constitution, but they're not going to do that under certain circumstances. They say, oh, it was an emergency. There is no emergency exception in the Constitution. You know, our ancestors understood that emergencies are the way that dictatorships take away your freedom. Because people get afraid. Oh my God, Jacob, we got a depression. Oh my gosh, the WMDs are coming, Jacob. And so, the invaders, the Muslims, the Sharia law, I mean, it just goes on and on with all the Russia, the Chinese, the commies are coming. That was what the whole Cold War emergency was about. The Reds are coming, the Reds are coming. And that's where you lose your liberty. Because people get so scared, they say, I'm willing to trade my liberty. You take my liberty away temporarily, give it back to me when everything settles down, but things never settle down. And so Americans lost their liberty a long time ago with the attachment of these systems, the welfare state system that has placed Americans on a political narcotic, the national security state system that destroyed America's limited government republic. The drug war, which is just this evil, immoral, massive, oppressive system of control and an excuse to assassinate people. And if anybody thinks that power of assassination with the secret evidence is limited to foreigners, you're living in la-la land. That is a power that now exists. Well, it's always existed. The CIA and the military have always been empowered ever since America got converted to a national security state to assassinate people. They ignore the Fifth Amendment. They don't give a darn about the Fifth Amendment. Why? Because they know the federal courts and the Supreme Court are not going to enforce the Constitution against the national security establishment, against the military, the CIA, the NSA. They're just not going to do it. And certainly not since the Kennedy assassination. Kennedy is the last president to take them on. And ever since then, no president has dared to take them on. Presidents get absorbed into the national security state. They do the bidding of the national security state. Now, as I've long pointed out, they let the national security establishment lets the president and the Congress and the judiciary have this veneer that they're in charge, like in a limited government republic. But it's just a veneer. It's the national security establishment that is in charge of running this federal government. And in fact, they're even publicly, I mean, usually they keep a low profile in that sense, but they got the CIA director going to Cuba. I guess trying to rub their noses in it. They've never forgotten the Cuban defeat, the communist defeat of the CIA-trained Cuban exiles at the Bay of Pigs. The CIA director was in Venezuela, meeting with the socialist communist ruler there. Now, why the CIA director? I thought that was the State Department's job. Well, because they are in charge, and they're kind of like showing it, but just with the surfacing of the CIA director in Cuba, communist Cuba, and communist Venezuela. Now, I should wrap up by saying that there's another humorous aspect that Secretary of State Rubio, Marco Rubio, exclaimed against Nicaragua's denial of elections. Okay, because Ortega there, he's been in there, I don't know, 30 years or so. But he said, well, we don't need elections anymore. I'll just stay here, and his wife's vice president. And Rubio, piously says, oh, see, this shows that you're an authoritarian regime and illegitimate and so forth. And then, well, what about Venezuela? They're not permitting elections there either. Ever since the U.S. government took control, they won't let elections be held. If Nicaragua is an authoritarian regime for not having elections, what about Venezuela? And they just released a few more political prisoners there, but they still have several hundred in jail. I mean, all Trump would have to do is give the order, release them all. But you see, no, you keep some political prisoners in jail to cow everybody that you're releasing and everybody in society from engaging in protesting, because you're telling them, we still have the power of incarceration, the power of torture, the power of indefinite detention, reflected by the fact that there's still hundreds of people in prison for protesting. Do you see any protests in the streets in Venezuela? Of course not, because it's still ruled by this brutal regime that's no different from the Nicaraguan regime. They're just as socialist, they're just as communist, but this is a U.S.-run regime. You see, it's different. So if they deny elections, well, that's different, Jacob, because it's not any different at all. It just shows you the evil and the hypocrisy of this regime. And it's not Trump. Trump's not the problem here, any more than Biden was the problem or Clinton was the problem. This is what I keep saying over and over again. These are the systems that 20th century Americans brought into existence and the 21st century Americans have kept in existence. The drug war system, the immigration control system, the monetary system, paper money, Federal Reserve, monetary central planning, the foreign interventionism system, the national security state system. I mean, all these systems that I've talked about in my work here at FFF, that's your problem here. It's not a problem of getting better people in public office to run this system. It's a problem of getting rid of these systems, dismantling them, taking them out of our original concept of a limited government republic. The income tax system, the IRS system, the terror system, the trade war system that like Trump is now instituting once again with Canada. I mean, all of this is destructive. This is your affordability problem. This is the entire problem, the political problem, the economic problem that the American people face. It lies right there in Washington. That's the problem. Not Iran, not Russia, not Muslims, not Islam, not the boat people in Venezuela. No, the U.S. government is the problem that confronts the American people. We need to raise people's vision to a higher level, and that is a level of liberty. And that's how we get America back on the right trajectory. Dismantling these systems so that people can be moving toward freedom and peace, prosperity, and harmony with the people of the world. Once again, this is Trump Watch. I'm Jacob Hornberger. Thank you again for tuning in, and thank you for your great support of FFA.